Jesus has been asked a question by a man who is well versed in the law. What is the greatest commandment in the law? Notice how Jesus responds. He said to him, "You must love Jehovah your God with your whole heart, and with your whole soul, and with your whole mind. This is the greatest and first commandment." You must love Jehovah your God. A command. Love for Jehovah is essential. It has to be the most important relationship in our life, more important than any human, more important than anything. We want to love Jehovah. To what extent? Well, Jesus says, with your whole heart. Now, what does that involve? The context of Jesus' words helps us to understand that he was talking about a person's feelings, emotions, desires. So does love for God involve our emotions? Absolutely. But it has to involve more than a simple affection for God. Why do we say that? Well, what did Jesus say next? With your whole soul. That is, with your entire being. We use everything we have to praise Jehovah and to prove our love for him. But even more is involved. Jesus concludes by saying, with your whole mind. So our intellectual faculties are involved. We're willing to take the time to get to know Jehovah's thinking and make it our thinking. We want to think the way Jehovah thinks. We want to understand his purpose and his requirements for us.
Wow, where do we even begin with that? We've just been hearing some incredibly culty ideas from governing body helper Seth Hyatt. He is handling the first symposium item of the first symposium of the 2022 Pursue Peace Convention, How Love Leads to Genuine Peace. And Seth Hyatt's theme is Love for God. And he invokes this verse about how love for God transcends everything. Jesus famously reminded the person who asked him about this, what's the greatest command, that the greatest command is that you should love God with your whole heart, your whole soul, and your whole mind. And Seth Hyatt proceeds to explain what that means for Jehovah's Witnesses. I've mentioned before, as a child, I can remember this particular verse giving me problems because I used to think, well, I love my mum and dad, I love my sister, you know, they're real, I can talk to them, I can get to know them, and I'm supposed to love God more than I love them. My love for God should dominate every other love. Everything else that I have in my life should be dominated by my love for someone who I can't see, I can't speak to, unless you count prayer as speaking to God. I have no way of meeting him, and I've got to love him more than anything else. And that's really made clear in Seth Hyatt's talk. I found it fascinating where he describes loving God as being a command.
You must love Jehovah your God with your whole heart, and with your whole soul, and with your whole mind. This is the greatest and first commandment.
Isn't it a bit odd that God needs to command people to love him? That's never a healthy thing, is it? If you're in a relationship with someone and you are compelled to love them, you are commanded or ordered to love them, not just love them, but love them more than anything else with your whole heart, soul, and mind, I would suggest that's not indicative of a healthy relationship. That's a weird thing to ask of someone, because ultimately, if we really do have free agency, if we really are allowed to be ourselves, to have our own unique personalities, have our own preferences, be free to love certain people or certain things, how can you possibly command someone to love you or command someone to love a God, which is what we're talking about here? It's a really weird thing. So no wonder when I was little, this verse perplexed me, because quite frankly, it just doesn't make any sense. You cannot order someone to love a particular thing or a particular person. You also have Seth Hyatt reminding Jehovah's Witnesses that loving Jehovah is more important than anything.
Love for Jehovah is essential. It has to be the most important relationship in our life, more important than any human, more important than anything.
Isn't it interesting that what the Bible has to say isn't enough? It's not enough for Seth Hyatt to simply read these words, which, again, don't make any sense. It's not enough for him to let people reach their own conclusions. He has got to add to the scriptures and explain what these words mean. And what they mean, apparently, is that loving Jehovah, not just loving God in your own way or loving your own interpretation of God in whatever religion suits you, but specifically loving Jehovah and doing whatever Jehovah, as interpreted by the governing body, directs you to do. That's more important than any human, than anything. And you can see where that sort of absolutist, black and white thinking can lead, and routinely does lead, when we're talking about Jehovah's Witnesses martyring themselves over the command to abstain from blood transfusions. That's where this sort of ideology is rooted. Because outsiders might look at Jehovah's Witnesses and think, how could you possibly let your child die, refusing them a life-saving blood transfusion, even though they're too young to make this decision for themselves? You're just going to force it on them. How could you watch your child die over this? Well, this is basically the reason. Because when you take your beliefs seriously as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, it's all or nothing. You have to put your religion first above everything and everyone, to the extent of allowing your loved ones to die or taking your own life by refusing blood. You also have, there's so much to take just from this short clip. But I also found it interesting where Seth Hyatt says,
we use everything we have to praise Jehovah and to prove our love for him.
Everything we have, we use to prove our love for God. So, time, energy, money. God always needs money, doesn't he? The supreme creator of all things is apparently always short of a few bob. And we need to pitch in. We need to do this because we need to prove our love. And this takes me back to the weird thing about being commanded to love someone. You're not just commanded to love God, you are also being told here that it's not just about what's going on in your head. It's not just like a thought crime issue where your synapses must be aligned so that you love this abstract being. You have to constantly prove it. It's not enough just to love. You have to constantly prove it. And again, we're in the realm of an abusive relationship, aren't we? It's more than likely an abusive relationship if you are being commanded to love someone. And it's more than likely an abusive relationship if you are being commanded to prove that you love someone, to give money or to give time or to give energy, rather than these things just being an organic thing where you feel personally motivated and you don't feel under any compulsion. Then we have Seth Hyatt reminding Jehovah's Witnesses what it means to love God with your whole mind.
We're willing to take the time to get to know Jehovah's thinking and make it our thinking.
We're willing to make God's thinking, as interpreted for us by the governing body, we're willing to make it our thinking. We're willing to alter who we are, alter how our brains work, alter our personality, put on the new personality, so that we're no longer our authentic selves. We are an assumed person or an assumed personality that's been prescribed for us, so that our thinking, the way our brains work, needs to change. Fascinating, isn't it, that they're having such a culty message right out of the gate, right at the beginning of the convention, the first talk of the first symposium, and they're telling Jehovah's Witnesses that they should not just love God with their whole heart, soul, and mind, but Seth Hyatt is going to great lengths to explain the extent to which they must do that. And conveniently, it turns out that loving God with your whole heart, soul, and mind means being able to put the organization and your religion before everything else, constantly prove that you love God by giving everything that you have, including money, and being willing to adopt the thinking that the organization prescribes for you.